For me, always the focus was more about cloud infrastructure. And what I've been seeing in the last few years, due to the fact of microservices and cloud native applications became a lot more complicated. I think people and companies just try to be better in thinking about the right problems they need to fix. And I mostly see the right and native trends that are happening as the technology evolves.
Welcome to another edition of Cloud Unfiltered. I'm your host, Michael Chenitz, and I have Ohad from M0 on today. How you doing?
Hey, Mike, great being here. Thanks.
So you've been around. I mean, I've seen your company around for a little while now, you're in a lot of it has to do a lot with orchestration. We'll get into and platform engineering and things like that. We'll get into that in a sec, but what made you come to this? What in your career or where did you start out and how did you kind of evolve along the way?
I'm a very proud geek, so I like technology. I like playing chess, all the cool stuff.
I'm the same way.
Awesome. So very early I became a programmer, and very quickly I decided that I'm more interested in how things work versus just building more features and applications. So I always paid more attention to the infrastructure. I also had the opportunity of working for a startup that got acquired by VMware a long time ago, like 15, 16 years ago. Wow, I'm old. And learning about virtualization before, nobody really used cloud back then. So, just from there and then to cloud. And now what M0 is about, how cloud is becoming code with infrastructure as code, such as Terraform, OpenTofu, Pulumi, and so on. So for me, just always caring about the not sure if hardware, but infrastructure, networking, storage, and how to make your applications run at scale. Those were always challenges that I cared most about. And a few years later, I decided to devote my life in a way to start a company that will solve some big challenges, in my opinion.
So here's a good question. The guest I had on last week, Corey, says DevOps is BS, right? He says that, we're worried about the wrong things and that people aren't even really implementing this stuff the right way. Are we going too far down that rabbit hole, or is it the right amount? Is it are we kind of codifying the right things? Are we successfully doing those things? And if not, how do we help along the way?
I think, every time you need to validate again the situation. I don't care about terminology like DevOps or other buzzwords.
I'm with you.
I care more about how people interact with each other and how great things are being built. And my focus, at least, there are a lot of things that we can discuss in cloud computing. You can talk about data and databases. You can obviously talk about Gen AI and how this affects everything. That's like the new biggest buzzword. You can talk about cloud security. For me, always the focus was more about cloud infrastructure. And what I've been seeing in the last few years, due to the fact of microservices and cloud native applications became a lot more complicated. And the natural thing in order to manage similar environments in scale was the introduction of infrastructure as code. CloudFormation for AWS as a vendor-specific framework, and then Terraform is the first real multi-cloud, back then open source framework that dominated became the de facto standard for how you represent cloud infrastructure with code. And I think people and companies just try to be better in thinking about the right problems they need to fix. And I mostly see the right and native trends that are happening as the technology evolves.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. I mean, I think every company has to evaluate their needs for themselves, but I think that's part of the problem I see. I interview a ton of people on this show, and one of the things that I always talk about is the fact that too many people kind of have a preconceived idea of what their needs are based on what the industry is saying those needs are. So they're saying, hey, my CIO tells me I need a cloud native stack. Well, I heard of Kubernetes, let's just do that. And I heard of, Terraform, let's just do that. And so they're kind of designing for that need, but not really stepping back and saying, hey, what are the needs of my application? How do I need to scale this? What are can I just use maybe a consultant to do this once a month? Or do I need it to be more dynamic? Do I need to automatically scale based on CPU and usage and things like that? And how does that affect my database? And how does that affect my schemas? And how does everything interconnect? So there's varying levels of complexity. And I think that if you're early in career, or even if you're later in career but new to the technology, you often say, okay, I'm just going to go to that next shiny object. And I always tell people, I'm totally the same way. I will go to the shiny object because I'm a technologist, but I work for emerging tech. So it's okay for me to do that. I have a pass, but I think for a lot of companies, they need to evaluate their needs first and then back into the solution.
Yeah. I could not agree more. So although I'm a geek, I think we the geeks have to be careful of doing the cool things.
Yep.
Okay. You have your hobbies and you have your place of work. It's different. Don't mix between those two. Don't make your work into a hobby and just use the great new technologies that you want to play with. It's not a place to play. It's a place of work. Your business has its needs. I remember I worked as an R&D manager in a company, and I had several team leaders that I managed. And in a way, I felt that they're trying to write a cool new book on how to do things. Back then, it was in .NET.
Mm-hmm.
And I was asking, I said, but why are we doing those cool things? Our company is losing money because we don't do A, B, and C. If you want in the evening or in the weekend to do those cool things and post some code in GitHub, be my guest. But now let's focus on the business needs and try to differentiate between the problem, the goals of what we're trying to do, and how. The question I like the most that employees ask is why? Why are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we doing that? And if you have a good amount of folks that will ask why, I think you will do the needed things in the right priority. But if people just want to say, that's cool, I've heard about that from a friend, and let's play with that and see what we can do with that, I think it's important to have some part of education and exploration and innovation in order to be familiar with new options, but it's not focused. The focus should be what are your goals, and then think what can be done, both old things that you don't need to reinvent the wheel and new things that make more sense as the technology stacks change.
Yeah, so where are we going with, obviously I don't care about the buzzwords. I'm like you, because I honestly, tell me what a company says, go to each company and ask them what DevOps is, and you'll get a different answer. Ask them what a DevSecOps is, you'll get a different answer. And a lot of these people, like I started out as a network engineer, and you know what? I wasn't just doing network engineering. I was doing security engineering. I was doing cybersecurity. I was doing solutions engineering for Microsoft and all this other stuff. So you start to move into these other things. But where are people, where is this all going today? Where is, platform engineering is the buzzword. You hear that a million times. I just got from somebody at the CNCF, come to our platform engineering breakfast, get some coffee. So obviously, there's a lot of stuff going there. I know that there's a secret internal group of people on a text chain that all talk together about platform engineering, and in the OpenTofu group. So where are we going with this, and how are we making it easier for people to consume? Because I think that's the key there. We have 10,000 or I don't even know how many different projects in the CNCF. How are we making this easier for people? What can they do? And where is it going?
So easy can be, this question can be taken in different directions.
Sure.
Easy, sometimes it's about education and being familiar with the technology, with the things you can achieve with the technology. What I see from my experience about empowering developers, I think what organizations eventually need to do, every company is a tech company. If you look at the hotels companies, if you look at banks, if like many consumer things, IKEA, everything eventually drives so much business through digital, and the communication you have with your customers is digital and running on the cloud. So every company is a tech company. So, and every company has its competition, and every CEO asks himself or herself, how I'm going to beat my competition, how I can be faster, better, and therefore drive more business. So if you're a tech company, you have tons of developers. So I think the key for businesses to beat their competition is to empower your developers in the most efficient way. And empowering them basically means how I'm making things easy for my developers. Now, what kind of things you need to do to make easy for your developers? One is general access to knowledge. Okay, how I do something within my organization, how I can access something like that, or that I need. And you have those concepts and tools that allow you to empower with knowledge. From my perspective, what I've seen that is very different today versus 5 years ago is how you empower them with self-service cloud infrastructure. So I'm a developer, I'm writing new features, and I need to test that, and eventually I need to deploy that. So how can the organization trust me that what I'm doing makes sense, and now I, as a developer, can do things efficiently and safe? So this, I think, is a fascinating key challenge that every company faces. And what I've been seeing in the last few years, that cloud is becoming code. So I don't need somebody to click a button in AWS GUI or Azure GUI, or maybe give me access to click a button. But somehow all of that infrastructure sits in my GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket repos. So how I'm a developer, I have cloud accounts, I have code. Somebody doesn't want me to do any stupid things about security, about cost. You know how easy it is? You've mentioned DevOps, DevSecOps, platform engineering. You didn't mention FinOps. You know how easy it is for a developer with cloud access to do a stupid mistake? And you're looking at somebody who did a lot of stupid mistakes, which caused a lot of money for my organizations because I had some nice access to our cloud accounts, and I needed to do some things without fully realizing the implications of what I'm doing. So maybe it's secure, maybe it's working fine. What about the OpEx? What about the cloud cost and the cloud bill shock that an organization is going to get? This is SEP. This is somebody else's problem. No, it should be my problem. I should get the ability to do the right things. And if I don't, the company will block me, and then it wouldn't be easy for me to innovate. So that, I think, is the key. How you empower your developers to work with speed, with collaboration, while still maintaining centralized governance on cloud deployments.
So how do you guys deal with that? I mean, obviously you have a company that has that. What are the main tenets of how you handle those things?
Great, thanks for asking. So every company, if I look at you mentioned trends.
Yeah.
So if I look, you're hardcore networking and security engineering background. So what does it mean, networking and security in the last 20 years? So 20, 25 years ago, you probably worked with physical servers, those pizza servers, and some
Nice rack.
routers.
Yeah.
And you enter the room with very cold, with air conditioning, AC
Mm-hmm.
working. I remember I had this big coat there because it's actually cold. Maybe
Yep.
the young generation that is listening to this podcast has no idea what the hell I'm talking about. But yeah, you had special keys, rooms, isolated, and coats. You had
Yep. Yep.
and you plug cables, mark cables. That was your job 20 years ago. Then came virtualization, and then with VMware and ZenSource, and then maybe you were able to click a button in order to change some networking and add a network interface for your virtual machine in a click of a button. That's like back then it was insane.
Yep.
Downtime to your server and using a screwdriver to actually put this network device or interface. Again, I think the young generation listening thinks I'm bluffing, and you never use a screwdriver. Yeah,
I can verify all of this.
we use screwdrivers, and we had a set of screwdrivers to make things work at scale. Obviously, then came public cloud, and you can click a button in order to get some compute, storage, database somewhere. And now it's code. And what Env0 is doing is helping companies to manage their cloud and their infrastructure as code at scale with confidence. Because when every developer or a lot of developers have access to the code which represents your infrastructure, that's extremely, extremely dangerous. And therefore, we see a lot of companies that dramatically slow down with their operations in order to be safe and reduce the risk. And you cannot compromise your innovations. How do you combine between self-service and governance? So that's where Env0 fits and basically allows you to define what your developers can do in a very granular way. Maybe they can execute this code on this cloud account, but not execute this code on the production cloud account. Okay, those concepts do not exist in AWS. AWS has no idea that you have code, Terraform code or CloudFormation code in GitHub. Okay, and has no idea that you have tons of developers with access to that code that can change that code, and then your next GitHub Actions pipeline will actually execute that code on both production and staging. So how you combine those new workflows that combine cloud with code, how you set policies. A big thing is policy as code. Open Policy Agent is the de facto standard for policy as code. So how you integrate that and basically validate that no matter what you do, you wouldn't provision wrong or invalid or unsecure cloud resources. So when you move using cloud with code, you have all of those scale and governance and risk and compliance and cost and security concerns. If you're interested in learning more, Env0 will help you to set safe guardrails to make sure shit is not happening, while still having your developers with maximum relevant access in a self-service kind of way.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And so On the back end, though, you guys deal with a lot of orchestration too. I know that one of the probably gave you a heart attack when Terraform decided to change their licensing. And so, why don't we talk a little bit about how OpenTofu came about? Because OpenTofu has that orchestration piece of it, and not only you, by the way, but it gave a lot of people a lot of angst when they kind of made that decision.
Yeah, yeah. So indeed, on August, HashiCorp announced that they're changing the licenses of several projects, including Terraform. But not sure if everybody knows, but although Terraform was legally open source up until August, at least in the past 2 years before changing the license, it didn't accept any community pull requests.
Hmm.
Okay, so it was legally open source, but it was not community driven or influenced, and therefore it kind of moved towards more uh, commercial DNA of a project until eventually 6 months ago, also the license changed from MPL to BSL. Now, when something is not open source and causes some risk, the BSL license talks about competing with HashiCorp products. Now, what's going to happen if HashiCorp a year from now is building another product, or I don't know what I'm going to build in another year and what's going to happen? And, for me as a founder, every time we raise money, we always need to send the list of software packages that we're using, and the investors expect to see nothing but open source licenses. Otherwise, it causes some risk and concerns. So the default is always open source, and open source has such a magical power to glue other open source projects. And I think the beauty of Terraform in the last 9 years really proved that of the power of open source. You have so many Terraform modules that were created by individuals. You have so many Terraform providers that were maintained by so many vendors. You have so many important projects, other open source projects that help you to get more value out of your Terraform code. I want to mention static code analysis, Chekhov, TFSec, TerraScan, in order to make sure you're not creating an EC2 instance with SSH open with the empty
Mhm.
bus, nothing like that. You don't want your Terraform code to do that. So yeah, you have tools that integrate with Terraform this way. You have Infra, another open source framework that allows you to understand the cost estimation of this Terraform code. I've mentioned OPA. There is Atlantis project that is also on its way to become CNCF that allows you to do GitOps with Terraform. So a lot of great things happened around Terraform thanks to that being open source. Now, the moment it's no longer open source, the trend becomes the reverse trend. And new projects are asking themselves, who should I support first? This BSL Terraform or maybe Pulumi or Crossplane that are multi-cloud open source infrastructure as code frameworks. And then you start have this fragmentation because
Mhm.
you need modules, you need providers. InfraCost doesn't support Crossplane, but InfraCost supports Terraform. So there's the chicken and the egg paradox of how to do those things in a way that is helpful for the community. And because Terraform is so mature and basically the de facto standard for infrastructure as code, it made sense to keep it open source. So if HashiCorp decided that for them it doesn't make sense anymore, I think the market quickly realized that there are other options. And I think the most powerful way for an open source project to prove that it's open source for the long run is not to be owned by a vendor, is to be owned by the relevant foundations, mainly the Linux Foundation and the Cloud Native Computing Foundation within the Linux Foundation. That's exactly what we've been doing in OpenTofu from day one. And I'm very happy that this is already like 20,000 GitHub stars and a lot of adoption. and not just compatible with Terraform, but also innovative. Just yesterday, we announced that OpenTofu uh, is is bringing important innovation that was long waited for Terraform and is still not there, which is the state encryption. For those who are not aware what I'm talking about, when you use Terraform, again, it's great, but eventually you're going to have some file called the state file, which stores some sensitive information. The file is plain text. So you now have a very important challenge of saving, of storing this file in a place that is secure, that you make sure nobody has access to that file. And that's a challenge. And the default, the thing that makes sense to use is encryption, to have this encryption on the fly and to store the keys somewhere in where you store the rest of the keys for the organization. So you don't create another security challenge for your organization. So yeah, OpenTofu includes that, and the beauty that it's done by the community. So now that OpenTofu is part of the Linux Foundation and soon the CNCF, the community realizes that that's the place to continue the innovation and continue to influence the future of open source infrastructure as code. And for me, it's a fascinating experience to see how something so quickly gets such massive adoption. So yeah, as you mentioned, for us in the first day or two, we thought, what does it mean? But I think we quickly realized that Terraform is open source nowadays, not because of HashiCorp, it's because of the wide ecosystem that was created from this thing. And it's like this snowball effect that you can now not really stop, and it will keep being open source. Another thing I want to mention is about TerraGrant, which is using Terraform, and it's also open source. And now TerraGrant is kind of shifting its focus to support OpenTofu. We are honored to have Evgeny from GrantWork, the creator of TerraGrant, part of the small group of the technical steering committee of OpenTofu. So I think TerraGrant has done a lot of amazing things for the future of infrastructure as code and open source and community. And the fact that folks from TerraGrant and GrantWork are part of the close or the small group behind OpenTofu, I think speak volume.
So give us like the quick synopsis of how OpenTofu came together. Like, who got frustrated and called somebody else and said, "Hey, we need to do something about this."
Sure. So actually, it was related to me as well. I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
So I'm the co-founder of NV0, and we have some competition that is doing similar things. And we all really understood the situation, and we understood the opportunity for both us as vendors and for the community and the technology ecosystem. Within a few hours, we already started talking with some of our competition. The next day, we scheduled a meeting, and we had like 15 founders in this
Wow.
meeting the next day. And what we decided to do before forking Terraform was to create a manifest which describes why it's important to keep Terraform open source and impartial and as part of the foundation. And the first ask was for HashiCorp to revert their decision and even maintain that as part of as a foundation. For their reasons, they decided that they're going to keep their decision, which didn't surprise us, but I think we did the right thing by
Sure.
getting support for a manifest, and then with all of the pledges, we had, I think, 800 pledges for our manifest
Huh.
from individuals and companies. And with this support of those pledges, we published our manifest, and called for keeping Terraform open source, either by HashiCorp collaborating this way or by us as a group bringing the community to a new project, a fork. And so far, I'm amazed to see what we've achieved in the last 6.5 months.
It's amazing how I mean that came together super fast, and it's amazing to see output this fast. I mean, I understand that it's forked, but you're already doing things past that. So
Yep.
that's utterly amazing, and it shows the power of community. Um, yeah,
It shows the power of the community, especially for such mature project with such a wide ecosystem that understands the importance of open source.
yeah, yeah. I mean, to me, I'm as a techie, I like things. I play around with all the technology. And when I heard this, I was shocked because I was a Terraform guy for many years too. Although I have to say, in the past, I don't know, a couple of years, I've been using Crossplane more because I'm the believer of I like having things as an operator in Kubernetes. I don't like Kubernetes being the source of all truth, and I like that concept. Now, that's just me as a techie. I'm not saying Crossplane's better. I'm not saying Terraform's worse or anything like that. That was my preference, just because I like the idea of that. But again, I go back to what is the need of the application, Really, do I need that? Probably not, but I just like the concept as a techie.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I want to say something about M0 and back to what you said earlier about making things easy for the developers.
Yeah.
So some developers, some architects will choose, different technologies. And eventually within your organization, especially when something is free and open source, you're going to see some use Terraform, some use Pulumi, some use Crossplane, some use CloudFormation. Why not? If it makes sense, do it. So each one has its pros and cons.
Sure.
So eventually, like you have .NET. Maybe .NET is not the best example, but you have Node.js and you have Python and you have Go. So you have all of those different programming languages that run your applications. And eventually you need one solution to manage different technologies. If we go to security scanning, so yeah, you need to scan all of your code, whether it's in Python or in Java, and to see if there are any security vulnerabilities. You need to check all of the packages that you use. So if it's Java and Maven packages, you need to make sure those make sense and you're using the latest and greatest and patched versions without security vulnerabilities, something that Snyk is doing very well, for example. So Snyk solution supports different programming languages. So the same approach we took with Env0 in order to empower organizations to manage infrastructure as code at scale with confidence, we don't support just Terraform and OpenTofu. We support TerraGrant, we support CloudFormation, we support Pulumi, and so on and so on. So eventually, if you're an organization and you have those different technologies facing the similar challenges as governance, predictability, management, I think it's important for vendors in general to allow freedom for their customers to choose the technology that they want. And I'm a big believer in maximum empowerment and maximum freedom for the developers. And it's for us to handle those technologies under one umbrella and one solution.
I couldn't agree more. And honestly, people, just as I am too, people get very religious about their tools. And if you tell them, hey, you're going to be confined to doing this way, they're going to say, "Oh, we're out." They're not going to even.
Wait, so
Yeah.
I have, when you say we're out, I remember working for a company and we thought about implementing AWS and it made a lot of sense. But then some VP got a great deal for Microsoft and announced, guys, great research, well done. We're going with Azure. And when you say we're out, so I already resigned regardless because I had some other plans in my career. But at that moment, few folks resigned.
Yep.
So yes, sometimes when somebody says I'm out, yeah, if you're not choosing the technology that I believe in and are religious about that, it can literally cause people to quit. By the way, I'm happy that some companies evaluated N of zero and some decided not to. And I'm aware of some architects that resigned from their places of work because they didn't choose N of zero and just went and building in-house solutions instead. So I think if somebody resigns because they didn't choose your technology or your tool, you're probably doing the right thing.
Yeah. I can tell you though. I mean, I'll leave I'll give you a short thing. We bought at Cisco. We bought what was it called? I was involved with this. We bought
Splunk.
not Splunk, no, but we bought. I can't think right now. Anyhow, I worked on this product that was called.
AppDynamics.
What's that?
AppD.
No, with Mo, with your friend Mo, with Mohit, with
Clicker.
Clicker. There we go. Why can't I think right now? Wow. So yeah, we worked on Clicker, and Clicker was great, but you know what it didn't do? It didn't do Terraform. And you know what people? We created this nice graphical interface, but then then Terraform came around, and people were like, "Well, we don't want to use this, be confined to this interface. We want to use the things we want to use."
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just, it shows you have to, you're always better integrating the solutions that other people already want to use and doing it in a logical way.
Yep. Yeah, that's what we do in N of zero. We just ask you, give us read access to your already existing code, and we'll do the rest. Don't change anything. Just give us read-only access to whatever you have.
So I know we're getting towards the end here. It's been great talking to you. What do you want to leave people with, and where can people find you or your company?
So first of all, it's great to be involved in such a podcast talking about the trends in cloud computing. As you saw, my angle is specifically about cloud infrastructure and definitely about infrastructure as code, with being a big fan of open source. So if somebody would like to reach out and talk about cloud infrastructure, about infrastructure as code, about open source, please reach out either in Twitter, DevOps Ohad. We said we don't talk about buzzwords such as DevOps, but my Twitter handle is DevOps Ohad, or you can easily go to my LinkedIn or our website, n0.com. And I love to just talk with practitioners about what they're seeing and brainstorm together. So yeah, thank you for this opportunity to reach out to the audience.
Well, thanks again for coming on Cloud Unfiltered, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's been a pleasure.